So it is I, Tantus Naravan Dracovin, Lord and Emperor of the Dracovin Empire, and welcome. It is time to continue our discussion on the various races of the Pathfinder role-playing game system. I go race by race over information that you might want to know about them, make you want to play them more, and not your standard races like your elves, dwarves, and halflings, the unusual ones. So today for you, I have the Tiefling. Now the Tiefling is an interesting race, as it is a combination, traditionally, of human blood and fiendish blood. They are descended from fiends. Now, most of these are not direct descendants of fiends. It tends to be a powerful blood which can go generation upon generation, sinking deep within their, well, genetics is a great way of saying it. And the taint of the fiendish blood often results in otherworldly powers and otherworldly appearances. Tieflings, because of this, are oftentimes shunned by the majority of societies that they find themselves in connection with, often seen as being incarnations of these fiends, which they themselves may never know. They may never know what fiend it is, where they came from, how it connected to their family. The connections, the information just is something that rarely Tieflings can even hint on. Now, though they inherit a lot of the fiend in them, Tieflings also, though, inherit something very critical from the human side. Choice. A lot of Tieflings face a darkness deep within them and a darkness around them. The society shuns them and pushes forth negative emotions on them. And the fiendishness deep in their soul pushes forth from them constantly, nags on their inner spirit. Many of them, though, do not succumb to this. Granted, some fight back against it, turning against it, being great heroes or saints in comparison to the succubi and Baelor pit fiends that may have been in their ancestry. So it is a very interesting juxtaposition that they have this choice, whether or not they embrace the darkness, even though it's there, or fight against it, or something in the middle. Now the thing about Tiefling is, very rarely do two Tiefling look anywhere near each other. To say that no two Tiefling look alike is not an understatement. You could have one that's quite human, with things like just small horns, maybe claws, a pointed tail. Others might have, like, bestial wings. Some might just smell of sulfur or brimstone. The wide variety of traits that are reflective of the fiendish nature of them is staggering. And though oftentimes you can find that a Tiefling can trace its traits back to the fiend it came from, i.e. whatever fiend it was that sired my bloodline, that's the kind of traits I have. The thing is, with the connection to it, that doesn't always happen. You can have Tieflings that have traits wildly different than that. It's just seemingly random at times what kind of combination of fiendish physical traits a Tiefling can have. You can have that connection, but it's just the adding of human to the mix of the fiend just creates utter chaos. So you can have, like, perplexingly beautiful Tiefling to just utterly horrible ones that make everybody kind of cringe back in fear and repulsiveness. Now, when Tiefling lives on the material plane, they rarely meet other Tieflings. They can, and one of the things is they rarely form Tiefling societies. The fact is, the majority of societies, both civilized and uncivilized, shun them in certain ways. Civilized tend to look at them for their fiend side and say, oh, you're fiend, you're terrible, you're evil. The uncivilized tend to shun them because they fear them, that they're connected to these dark powers. So they don't have a great connection to society, though they will adopt the tenets of the society they are raised within. So regardless, they are connected to it. It's just they're not going to make something on their own. Traditionally, they're connected with their human parents. Now, the other thing to say about Tieflings in this case is the exception to any of this. If the society that they are living in either specifically worships fiends of some kind, or doesn't outlaw it. In this case, they can find situations where they are looked upon with reverence, or at least acceptance. If it's a society where, demon worship, not looked down upon, so they're demon-blooded. Oh, hey, we're okay. If it's something that's expanded in the society, then hey, they're looked on a gift from their fiendish masters upon the group. Now, when it comes to the outer planes, if you have tieflings out there, they do try to tend to form societies of their own, small ones. There are inherent problems there also. Tieflings can only get along as much as their own kind is, almost. Basically, whatever bloodline they come from, they tend to have tendencies towards that bloodline, and if they embrace those tendencies, the friction in amongst the society sort of secularizes them to those groups. So you have your succubus group over there, your pit fiend over there, your Baelor over there, etc., etc. They have this tension between them. Tieflings that find acceptance within these outer plane societies, will find that those that do not embrace the bloodline within them and overcome that tend to find more acceptance with all the groups. And that's just another thing that they would have to overcome within this social situation. Now, despite the social pressures and the fiendish pressures deep within them, their bloodline, tieflings can really be any alignment. There are those, of course, that embrace the darkness within them and become terrible villains. There are those that decide that because they're faced with such odds, they must overcome it as almost a test, as almost something to barrier, and become the greatest warriors and heroes of them all. Most tieflings just sort of put their heads down and kind of go in the middle. They seek that kind of balance of neutrality between everything, because they don't want anything to do with it all. They don't want to bother with the fiendish outlines. They don't want to kind of push people away. They just want to be left alone. Now, this tends to be in a moral neutrality, but it's what they kind of settle into. Now, though, again, they're looked upon as this fiendish incarnations that worship devils, just like any human, they really can worship anything. Tieflings could worship so many different aspects of so many different religions. They could worship any god, all the gods, whatever. Those that do embrace their fiendish sides will tend to worship fiends, but that's a specific group. Now, because of the nature of tieflings, because they are sort of this fringe, shunned part of society, they make great adventurers. They are oftentimes leave home, enter the world, find their way in the world before settling down somewhere. Oftentimes resulting in lots of adventuring. It's escape. It's trying to get some freedom from the blood within them, that taint within them, whether they're actually rejecting it or not. Now, tieflings tend to make good rogues, wizards, magi, and especially sorcerers. They have unique abilities that they have bonuses when it comes to sorceress bloodlines, especially bloodlines that call upon their fiendish ancestry. Those that do become evil and succumb to the darkness tend more towards clerics of fiendish powers. Now let's talk about some of the standard racial abilities of your tiefling. They get bonuses to dexterity and intelligence, and a penalty to charisma. This is where that sorcerer's bloodline comes in, because it kind of balances out their penalty to charisma. We'll talk about that. Now, they are a outsider. That's their type. Not humanoid, but they're a native outsider. So if you're in the material plane, you're home in the material plane. Things that target outsiders treat you as if you're in your home plane. Good for you as a tiefling. But it also means that things that would target people don't target you. Now, they are skilled at bluff and stealth, getting bonus to them. They have a fiendish resilience to their bodies. This gives them electric, cold, and fire resistance, all 5. They have a dark vision of 60 feet. They can see 60 feet in the dark. And they have a spell-like ability they can use once a day to create darkness. And of course, as I mentioned, their fiendish sorcery, which if they are the infernal or abyssal bloodlines of sorcery, they treat their charisma too high. For all their sorcerer class abilities. It cancels out their penalty to charisma. Now, tieflings have a great number of alternate racial traits you can choose from. Some make you better liar. You get purely bluff bonuses to lying when it comes to skill bonuses. Some give you some bonuses to combat maneuvers. You're more of a bully, giving you bonuses to things like disarm. Some are quicker. They can sprint a little faster. Some have kind of embraced the light side of things. They resist their darkness completely and utterly, and actually gain a Aasimar trait instead of a tiefling one, kind of replacing it, showing that they're kind of embracing good rather than evil. Some have fangs, maws, or claws, so they can scratch or bite you. Some can pass nearly perfectly for human. Their fiendish traits are so subtle unless they were pointed out, you couldn't notice. Like, only in the throes of passion do your eyes glow red. That could be one. Some have a prehensile tail. It allows them to use a swift action to pull out an item with their tail. Thanks, tail! Some of them have, rather than their normal resistance, a natural armor to them, almost like a scaly skin that helps defend them. Some can smite good, kind of like an anti-paladin or blackguard could do. Some have a kind of spirit sight, effectively Death Watch, and some even have vestigial wings, which though doesn't grant them the ability to fly if they have some other way to fly, gives them some more maneuverability. Now for favored class options, they do have a couple of unusual and interesting ones. For alchemists, they get more damage. For magus, they get bonus to their arcane pool. That's a pretty good one. For summoners, their eidolons gets extra skill points. That doesn't sound like a lot, but that can mean a lot. Especially if you're using your eidolon for a lot of things. And for wizards, their wizard school arcane powers, they get extra uses of those, which is pretty good too. So all of these, none of them are super great, I would call any of these favored class bonuses, but all of them are pretty decent and have some good uses, if done correctly. Now let's talk about some special alternatives for tieflings, before we hit anything else, because this is important information. First off, non-human tieflings. Fiends can breed with other things. If you look at the half-fiend template, which is the origin of many tieflings, it can apply to a crapload of things, more than just humanoids. And so you can have fiends breeding with a lot of weird stuff. Now granted, things that are not humanoid, we don't care about them. They tend to either be half-fiends right away, or then lead to fiendish creatures of that bloodline, having the fiendish template instead. For humanoids, though, we go from half-fiend to tieflings in them. And the thing about this is, if I'm a tiefling of a dwarf, or a halfling, or I'm a tiefling of an ogre, the only big difference in this is size. That's it. So you can just basically change around the size category of things. The other traits will exactly be the same. All the racial traits will be based upon tiefling. These non-humanoid races, if you're using one or allowing one, will just change the general height, size of your tiefling. And that's it. Maybe some body shape will be slightly closer to the race that it is, but the stats are exactly the same. Now let's talk about variant fiendish heritage. Now, originally when variant fiendish heritage was introduced, you needed a special feat called fiendish heritage. I will explain what that does now, but since then it has been eroded in further books that, similar to an Aasimar, that it can have variant heritage of where its celestial heritage came from, you can choose what kind of fiend you came from. This alters your, of course, attributes, how they are getting pluses and minuses, we change those around. It alters the skills that you get, and it alters the spell-like ability. All these three things just basically depend on what you're saying. If I'm blood of a demon, or I'm blood of a devil, and maybe even some specific types broken down in there, giving you various different bonuses. There are a lot of different types of fiends that you can be bloodlined to. 10 different ones to be exact. So you can either roll, choose, you can discuss it with your GM, how they're going to handle it, and if you're going to use it at all. You can just be the standard fiend, tiefling. Standard tiefling, whatever, your choice. And your GM's choice, remember. You're going to discuss with them if you want to handle this. But you are technically allowed to take one if you really want to, or roll one. Now, similar connected to that is variant tiefling abilities and physical features. Now, this is technically made more for NPCs, that I, as a GM, creating a tiefling NPC, I'm going to add some of these into it. Now, originally, you needed fiendish heritage to get one. Now, fiendish heritage gives you 3 of these traits. That's the big bonus out of it. Now, again, this is a kind of random chart. You could roll it, get one of these many abilities, add it to your character, which if you're using variant heritage, they recommend you use with it, and you can just do that. Variant heritage, roll one, you get it, get a physical feature, things like that. There you go, I got my tiefling. Now, I, as a player, could also choose one and go to approval from my GM, and they could say, that looks pretty cool. We'll do that. And of course, we have the fiendish heritage, which similar just gives you the option of 3. Either roll or choose, again, with approval for GM about what kind of character you're building. I would discuss it with them if they want it more random, if they want it more selected. But this is one of the feats that we're going to talk about when it comes to Tiefling, because this unlocks interesting things. Having 3 of these traits, because these traits are small. They're like little racial traits that with feet, you get 3 of these little things. And they're quite interesting. As someone that's used them before, quite interesting. Now, there are 2 racial archetypes for classes that I want to mention when it comes to Tiefling. First is the Fiend Flayer, which is a Magus archetype, which they practice actually flaying away their own fiendish flesh and using that to gain lots of arcane powers and abilities. So they're kind of like self-mutilation for dark powers that they can use to kill other things off. Kind of interesting thing there, and you could kind of go with different alignments with that one, kind of flaying it away so you remove the evil and use it to destroy other evil, or to live it up the infernal power. Now, another one that's very evil is the Fiendish Vessel, which is for a cleric, which effectively you're becoming a vessel for kind of the possession of a fiendish force you're making a deal with. In this case, whatever patron you're getting that you're making a deal with, your alignment must match them. Exactly. Unlike normal clerics, where you can be a little off. You get some powerful evil channeling abilities, which, if you were going to check it out, you're going to be an evil character. Now, racial traits, like actual traits, which is an optional rule, there's a billion of them. There's a lot of Tiefling ones. I recommend if you are playing with traits, you check it out yourself, especially if you're playing a Tiefling. There are many that could be helpful to you, just giving you little advantages which make your Tiefling more unique. As for feats that Tieflings actually get, their feats are an interesting variety of them. They come in basically a couple of forms. Many of the feats actually will either directly fill in the gap that one of the racial or alternate racial traits you have would be, or enhance it to ability. They have things that will enhance natural armor. If they already have it, it becomes better. If they didn't have a prehensile tail, now they do, or it becomes better. Things like that you can enhance or grant yourselves, like the Fiendish Resistance. I better resistance. These are just some examples that you take these feats, you get better versions of whatever you would naturally have, or if you took other racial traits, you can still get some of these ones that maybe you wanted. You can even do things like cast darkness more than once a day, basically improve the amount of times they use their spell-like ability. These are just some examples of some of the feats. They have a good listing of over a dozen feats for Tieflings. So if you're looking to create a unique and interesting Tiefling experience for your characters, I definitely would recommend looking at these directly when building your character. There are some very cool ways that you can make a very interesting Tiefling, whether good or evil, to live up to this fiendish potential in a way and use its powers for good or for evil. So definitely I recommend taking a look at them. And I've taken a few of them before, like the tail one. Grasping Tail makes your prehensile tail even better. Or Armor of the Pits, a little bit more natural armor. Anyway, that's it for today. So I've introduced you to the Tiefling. The Tiefling is an interesting and conflicted character. There are those that embrace the darkness of their fiendish heritage, and those that resist them, becoming signs of light. Others that they just try to get along in the world. They're variety. Just as humans have variety, so do Tieflings. It's just you always have to remember that gnawing noise in the back of your head when you're playing one. That little dark voice telling you to murder, destroy, corrupt. It's always going to be there. You can't deny it. You can't get rid of it. You just have to learn to listen closer. Or ignore it. Or even yell back at it. That head's a jerk, and you don't want to hear it anymore. And it'll still talk, though, but you can always yell back at it. But, anyway, I hope you're having a great day. If you have an interesting Tiefling character that you've played, whether you've embraced evil, or resisted it, or something in between, let me know in the comments below. I love hearing about your characters and the adventures that they've had. And regardless, though, until the next time, I bid you farewell.